History remembers him as a marble statue, stoic, somber, and silent. But the real Abraham Lincoln, he was a high-pitched, joke-telling, 6'4" powerhouse who could out-wrestle almost any man in the frontier. Before he was the great emancipator, he was a man who failed at business, lost multiple elections, and struggled with a melancholy so deep it often left him bedridden. Today, we're peeling back the myth. From the dirt floor of a Kentucky cabin to the bloody battlefields of the Civil War. This is the 10-minute deep dive into the man who saved the United States from itself. Born in 1809 in a single-room log cabin, Lincoln's early life was defined by losing. He lost his mother, Nancy, when he was only 9 years old. He lost his sister shortly after. His father, Thomas, was a rugged man who saw Abe's love for books as laziness. While other boys were hunting, Abe was walking miles just to borrow a book on grammar or law. He famously said, "My best friend is a man who can give me a book I haven't read." In his 20s, he was a flatboatman, a postmaster, and a general store owner who went deep into debt. But it was in New Salem, Illinois, that the legend of Honest Abe was born. When he accidentally overcharged a customer by a few cents, he walked miles after closing just to return the change. This wasn't just a PR move. It was a core identity. He was a man obsessed with the truth, in a world that was becoming increasingly divided by lies. Lincoln taught himself the law by reading Blackstone's commentaries. He didn't go to Harvard or Yale. He just sat on the grass and read until he understood. As a lawyer on the 8th Judicial Circuit, he spent months away from home, riding on horseback from town to town. This is where he mastered the art of storytelling. He realized that a well-timed joke could win over a jury better than a dry legal argument. But the 1850s changed everything. The Kansas-Nebraska Act threatened to spread slavery into the West, and Lincoln felt a moral fire ignite. He challenged the titan of politics, Stephen A. Douglas, to a series of debates. He lost that Senate race, but his words specifically, his House-divided speech, sent shockwaves through the country. He argued that a nation cannot endure half slave and half free. It was a radical idea that made him the dark horse candidate for the presidency in 1860. When Lincoln took the oath of office in 1861, 7 states had already left the Union. He had to sneak into Washington, D.C. at night to avoid assassination plots. Think about that. The president-elect couldn't even walk openly in his own capital. The Civil War wasn't just a political struggle for him, it was personal. He watched young men die by the thousands, and he felt every single casualty. Inside the White House, he suffered the death of his 11-year-old son, Willie, to typhoid fever. While his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, spiraled into grief, Abe had to command a war. He stayed up until 2 a.m. at the telegraph office, waiting for news from the front lines. He fired general after general for being too timid, famously telling General McClellan, "If you don't want to use the army, I should like to borrow it for a while." Lincoln's greatest legacy is the Emancipation Proclamation. At first, he hesitant. He was a constitutionalist. He wasn't sure he had the legal power to end slavery. But as the war dragged on, he realized that to save the Union, he had to destroy the institution that was tearing it apart. Then came Gettysburg. In 1863, he was invited to say a few appropriate remarks at a cemetery dedication. The featured speaker talked for 2 hours. Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes. He didn't mention the North or the South. He mentioned the people. He shifted the American identity from a collection of states to a single, unified nation dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. It is arguably the most important speech in the English language. By 1865, Lincoln was a shell of a man. If you look at photos from his first inauguration versus his second, he looks like he aged 30 years and 4. He had won. The South had surrendered. He told his wife he wanted to visit the Holy Land and retire in peace. On April 14, 1865, Good Friday, he went to see a comedy at Ford's Theater. He wanted to laugh. Instead, the world's most famous actor, John Wilkes Booth, stepped into the box and fired a single shot. Lincoln never regained consciousness. He became the first American president to be assassinated, dying just as his vision for a reconstructed America was beginning. Secretary of State Edwin Stanton famously remarked at his bedside, "Now he belongs to the ages." Abraham Lincoln wasn't a saint. He was a flawed man who lived in an impossible time. But he had the courage to change his mind, the humility to listen to his enemies, and the iron will to keep a country together when it wanted to break. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 16th president, hit that like button. We've got more historical breakdowns coming every week. What historical figure should we cover next? Let us know in the comments below.